July 5, 1978. England, Cokeworth. Sergei apparat to Cokeworth around 10 in the morning. The wedding of Lily Evans' sister and her groom was scheduled for noon. According to local traditions, the wedding ceremony was supposed to take place at the town hall, followed by a small reception at home for relatives and guests. After some contemplation, Sergei realized that the local tradition of celebrating weddings on a weekday was driven by English frugality and formality. Midweek celebrations were short-lived, as everyone had their commitments, work, and various childcare arrangements until 9 in the evening. In Russia, weddings were celebrated more lavishly, with heart and soul, with bride ransom, kidnapping, fights, and possibly even a second or third day of festivities. Even if there wasn't much to offer, the table had to be overflowing, even if only with pickles and boiled potatoes, especially since the marrying couple could purchase not only new clothes, footwear, and necessary accessories with special vouchers, but also some delicacies. He and Natasha had gotten married in January 1983. They had even managed to get carnations for the bridal bouquet through connections at Moe's Film. Sergei closed his eyes, pushing away the vision of his beloved wife in a long veil and a homemade lace dress, surrounded by large snowflakes in the middle of a foreign country, in an unfamiliar city, and in a different time. Apparently, the Cokeworth Park had triggered this memory, the only green spot in the grey city, and the white snow of blossoming poplars.
Sirius Black.
A female voice called out, and Sergei turned around. "Oh, hello, Mrs. Snape," he greeted Severus's mother, whom he recognized with some difficulty. The woman looked much better than she had at that Christmas about a year and a half ago when he and Severus had visited his parents' home. As far as Sergei knew, Eileen Snape continued to reside in Cokeworth, not particularly keen on seeing her father, but she didn't interfere with Severus Jr.'s visits. Mrs. Snape had a wand hanging in her skirt's hem, concealed by muggle-repelling charms, and her clothing fit well and was prosperous, so to speak. There was no sloppiness or untidiness, she was just a normal woman, not too young or beautiful, but her aristocratic upbringing was evident, a straight posture and a slightly raised chin, her completely black hair tied up in a high bun with no signs of grey.
"It's amazing to see you in Cokeworth, Sirius."
"We were just invited to Lily Evans' sister's wedding, you know the Evanses? I thought I'd arrive early, maybe chat with Severus if he's here. And also, I need to buy some muggle gift for the newlyweds. I doubt they'd appreciate something magical, and the statute."
"Oh, Severus isn't home right now,"
Mrs. Snape replied, slightly turning away and suppressing a sigh.
"Lately, my son doesn't visit here often. He brings medicines, money, food, and leaves. But I understand him. Besides, he's studying for his master's. He was here on Saturday when you graduated from Hogwarts, then he left. I don't know when I'll see him again, he said he'd be busy."
"Medicines? So, you've been ill? But it seems you're much better. You look well."
"Thank you."
Mrs. Snape smiled slightly.
"And yes, I know the Evanses. A witch was born into their family, right? Lily, isn't it? So, it's Petunia's wedding."
"Seems like it. I just have no idea what kind of gift to give. What do people generally give on such occasions?"
"It seems like anything goes. Didn't Lily show a wedding registry? And it's strange that she invited friends to her sister's wedding. That's not the norm, I think, although, maybe it's different among muggles, I'm not sure."
"What's a wedding registry?" Sergei asked, surprised by the new concept he had never heard of before.
"It's something like a list of desired gifts that are distributed among relatives and colleagues. The bride and groom list what they'd like to receive, and guests choose what to give. They send the gift on the wedding day or a little earlier. I've heard that the gifts are opened after the honeymoon, but I don't know if Petunia will have one, I've never seen her fiancé. And I've never had anything like that myself."
The woman said with a weak smile. "Perhaps it's not worth the trouble and I should just give them money in an envelope." Sergei sighed. I haven't seen that registry anyway. This way, they can buy something they didn't receive. Is that acceptable?
It seems you can give money, or checks made out to the bearer. But I'm not entirely sure. But, you know, Muggles have their own money, right?
Mrs. Snape delicately hinted. Of course, I know, Sirius smiled. I just need to buy an envelope and, maybe a card? I doubt they'd be pleased if I transfigured them from something, and the transfiguration wore off when they returned from their honeymoon.
Sensible. I'll show you where you can buy an envelope and a card in Cokeworth.
Sergei met James at 11:30 near the town hall in Cokeworth.
Hello, Sirius.
Potter greeted him with a wide smile, and after all the events and Peter's confession, Sergei didn't know how to feel about him anymore. Of course, it was necessary to maintain a friendship or at least the appearance of it to fulfill part of the magical contract regarding the godson, but it was truly challenging. James was a spoiled boy who didn't seem to feel any visible guilt or remorse for how things had turned out with his parents, aunt, and uncle. On the contrary, Potter seemed perfectly content. He had money, his own home, no supervision or guardianship, and Lily, who appeared to consider herself the mistress of the Godric's Hollow House. Sergei believed that Euphemia and Flemont had done their son a disservice by shielding him from punishment. James had never truly understood, realized, or repented for his actions. According to the Black family's harsh yet somehow just laws, there was a possibility for James, who unintentionally killed Doria Potter, to earn something like reparation. It didn't necessarily mean a mandatory death sentence. Sometimes it could involve magic, redemption through a complex task or assignment, or even giving the Black family their firstborn. Sergei's contemplations on the essence of magic led him to the conclusion that although James had desperately tried to avoid punishment, fate had twisted things in a way that effectively placed his firstborn in the hands of the Black family. If only they had handled everything more humanely, and James hadn't listened to Dumbledore and agreed to betray them. It appeared that James's parents had only made things worse by taking the blame for their son's actions. According to Lady Wahlberger's accounts, Euphemia and Flemont had killed Doria and Carlus's eldest son, who was also half a Black, showing respect for their ancestors' traditions. If one looked at it from the perspective that the Blacks were to blame for everything. But the situation was different there, deliberate murder to cover up another crime. However, it seemed that when James's parents took responsibility, they absolved their son of guilt in the eyes of the Black family. An eye for an eye. 2 for 2. If James hadn't thought about harming the Black family, he might have been forgiven conditionally, although he would still be on notice. The laws of magical justice were in action. So, most likely, Sirius inherited the role of godfather precisely because of this. Such intricate mental structures were quite complex, but after 2 years of studying magic, sitting with the Black family code, and spending time in the Black House library, Sergei had come to understand many things. Magic had nothing to do with miracles, it was a science akin to physics or chemistry. Nothing happened just out of nowhere. Nothing disappeared into nothingness. Everything returned and existed within a specific life cycle. Only a dreadful chain of events, lucky ill wishes, the betrayal of close friends, and above all, the betrayal by the heir of one's own family, had led to the downfall of the house. To a gruesome destruction that Sergei had no intention of allowing.
Nice suit. You look like a respectable Muggle, unlike me.
And he laughed at his own joke.
You should have come on your motorcycle.
Not to a wedding. And you could have dressed more decently than this, Sergei commented on his friend's attire, which resembled a classic hippie style. After all, it's a celebration for people. He took out his wand, cast a distraction charm around, and transfigured James's clothing into a traditional summer men's suit.
Now I'll outshine the groom. By the way, this Vernon is quite the unpleasant Muggle. So proper, it's as if he's got a violin up his rear. He walks around and talks as if he's the one in charge. Lily thought it would be a good idea for us to meet before their wedding. We went to a Muggle cafe together a couple of days ago. It was something else, my friend. This Vernon, by the way, is already quite old, definitely over 30, and Petunia, just a year or 4 older than Lily, although she's all muggle, she was hissing and making her eyes scary so that we wouldn't frighten her Desleys, can you imagine? What a last name, right? Desley. He started asking me all sorts of questions, where I work, and how much I earn. He even read my notations and offered me a job. Can you imagine? What an idiot. So patronizing, it's laughable. Well, you'll see for yourself.
James finished his tirade, grinning widely.
Here they come.
James. Sirius.
Lily Evans approached them in a green and teal bridesmaid dress.
Oh, how glad I am to see you. It won't be so boring at this wedding now.
Hello, Lily, Sergei greeted, feeling a twinge at the choice of words.
Oh, you won't be bored, I promise.
James teased, and Sergei noticed the nervous glances from the bride. Petunia Evans, Lily's older sister, was a fairly attractive blonde with a slightly elongated face, although it might have been due to her surprise and desire to keep young wizards from playful jokes and pranks at her wedding. In Britain, weddings were celebrated quite differently. After the registration at the registry office, the bride and groom danced their first dance, and then Mr. Evans danced with Petunia. Afterward, they had what was called a wedding breakfast, which took place at the Evans home. There weren't many people, just 16 in total. There was a table with snacks in the room, but no one sat down, they just approached it to grab something to eat. Petunia also tossed her wedding bouquet to the few unmarried girls, which seemed strange to Sergei, as he didn't recall this tradition. Lily caught the bouquet and smiled significantly at James. Later, Sergei learned that catching the bouquet was a sign that the one who caught it would get married soon. Potter was terribly bored, and he tried to entertain himself with jokes about muggles, but Sergei intervened and shut it down 3 times. In the end, the bride's celebration wasn't spoiled, which was just fine. Around 6 in the evening, after handing over the gift envelope, Sergei bid farewell to the newlyweds Dursley, went outside, turned to a discreet clearing with an oak tree, and disapparated to London. He still had to settle the matter with Peter. For people like those scoundrels who killed Mr. Pettigrew, Sergei had personal scores to settle from his previous life.
July 5, 1978. England, London.
Peter, what's wrong with you?
His mother asked.
You seem so agitated today. Is it because of that letter you received this morning? What was written in it?
Nothing special. Everything's fine, Mom, Peter replied calmly, trying to steady his voice. Everything is okay. I think I'll take a walk. He put on a light windbreaker and slipped his wand into his pocket. It was going to be chilly by the docks.
Try not to get into trouble,
His mother said quietly as he left. Peter didn't respond and quickly left the small family apartment. He heard the chimes of the quarter bell in the north tower of the Westminster Palace from the Thames. Big Ben was supposed to strike 6 o'clock in 15 minutes. However, Sirius might be running late, especially since he had been invited to some wedding. Getting ready for a long wait, Peter walked briskly to the docks and took up a comfortable position from which he could keep an eye on the approach. He leaned against a small protrusion on a building and blended in with the scenery. This skill didn't require wand waving, it was his own development and habit. For a detective, being inconspicuous and having the ability for long-term surveillance are important. As a child, Peter dreamed of becoming a detective, just like the famous Sherlock Holmes. His father, Sam Pettigrew, loved detective novels and passed his love for them down to his son. In their small apartment, there was an entire shelf filled with lovingly purchased and well-read books: Arthur Conan Doyle, Agatha Christie, Ian Fleming, James Phillis, and even the American Rex Stout made appearances. When Peter's parents told him he was a wizard, he thought that even wizards might need magical investigators. After Sirius Black helped reconstruct the death of Sam Pettigrew, Peter suspected that his old man's curiosity and those damned detectives had let him down. In such stories, you always associate yourself with the main detective, or at least their assistant, but never with the victim or an uncooperative witness. It was banal and hurtful to tears. Peter enjoyed discovering secrets, unraveling mysteries, and enigmas. Of course, there weren't any particularly convoluted stories at Hogwarts. At least, not until recently, when he overheard a conversation between Professor Dumbledore and James Potter. However, nothing unusual had happened since then. James acted as usual. Sirius, to whom Peter had shared the overheard information, seemed the same as well. They were preparing for exams and thinking about the future. After passing their newts, it was necessary to send their applications to the Ministry of Magic to receive directions for the 3-year Auror training program. James Potter spent 2 whole months describing how amazing it would be, the same school but with a bit of discipline and dormitories provided for those who needed them. Upon completion, they would be awarded the title of an Auror, responsible for apprehending criminals and dark wizards. Most of James' persuasion efforts were directed at Sirius, and it seemed like he didn't even know that Peter was aiming for the same ministry department. Of course, it wasn't a detective agency, but everyone had to start somewhere. A career in the magical law enforcement was a fairly obvious path for Peter to stay in the wizarding world. Unlike many other departments, they accepted half-bloods and first-generation purebloods. Peter himself viewed becoming an Auror as a step towards his dream, so starting from his 5th year, he focused heavily on the subjects required for admission. James also often talked about something called the Order of the Phoenix, encouraging them to join this secret organization. However, Peter thought it would be better to stay away from Professor Dumbledore and his machinations. Black thanked Peter for the information and seemed to take it seriously, but he didn't rush to expose James. As if everything between them was still the same. Sirius had also decided to become an Auror, and it seemed he was open to the idea of joining the secret order. On the other hand, Black always did things his own way and didn't listen to anyone's advice. Peter didn't want to get involved, it could cost him dearly. It was already surprising that Sirius had kept his promise made in April, and just a couple of days ago, they had solved the murder of Peter's father. It turned out that 2 local Scotland Yard inspectors had been colluding with the Turkish mafia, accepting money from them. The members of the gang had discovered Sam Pettigrew, who had witnessed this, mistook him for a spy, and brought him to a meeting. Peter's father occasionally drank at the police pub, so he recognized the inspectors and could have informed his colleagues. One of the inspectors asked his partners to get rid of the witness and stage it as a simple robbery. However, they seemed to have gone too far or left too many noticeable traces. Later, the case was closed with the involvement of those 2. During the magical reconstruction of events, one of the inspector's phrases struck Peter as strange because it seemed that his father had intentionally been monitoring this mafia group. As if he were an informant for the police. However, when Peter asked his mother about it, she said she didn't know anything about it, but it was entirely possible. Sirius had promised to come up with something and visit Peter today. But what could Black do? How could he help? Aurors didn't get involved in Muggle affairs. Were they supposed to deliver justice themselves? If someone found out, it would be very bad. Sam Pettigrew was a wizard, but he kept his wand at home due to the statute of secrecy and various restrictive magical laws. Who would want to go to Azkaban? Besides, Sirius had a big target on his back, courtesy of Dumbledore, so it was better not to get involved in Muggle affairs. What if someone found out? Peter looked gloomily at the grey waters of the Thames. In the morning, an owl from the ministry had arrived with a refusal for the Auror training program without giving a reason.
Hello, Peter.
Sirius Black's arrival interrupted Peter's somber thoughts. Hi, Sirius.
Sorry, I'm a little late. An owl caught me on the way here. Very strange.
Black fiddled with a letter bearing a familiar emblem. Peter had received an identical one earlier that morning. It's probably from the ministry, regarding the Auror training. I got the same thing today, A rejection, Peter replied, his mood sinking even further. Bright blue eyes studied the wax seal, the name and address written on the envelope.
I wonder why they'd write to me. I didn't submit any application.
You didn't apply? But, you said, Peter was surprised.
Sometimes it's easier to agree and not follow through. Besides, I never promised to become an aura. It's really their emblem. How strange. Maybe we should just burn it right away.
Why burn it? Peter was surprised.
Well, what if there's a magical contract inside that activates upon opening?
Sirius twirled the letter again.
Besides, like I said, I didn't apply to the Ministry of Magic. So.
Wait. Peter stopped Sirius, who had already aimed his wand at the envelope. Let me open it and see what's inside. It might be something important.
All right, but I'll still check.
Sirius replied and cast a range of different spells on the letter.
It seems clean. No curses, no poisons, no surprises. Here you go.
Peter broke the ministry seal and retrieved a sheet of paper with familiar curly handwriting. We would like to inform you that you have been accepted into the Aura training program. Classes start on the 1st of August. The assembly point is Russell Square at noon. Please bring your wand, the pass letter, and a change of clothes, Peter read aloud.
The pass letter isn't personalized, is it?
It doesn't seem so, only the name on the envelope.
What nonsense. Give me your envelope.
Here you go. Sirius studied the short rejection letter, pulled it out, put it in the envelope addressed to Peter, and set both his letter and envelope on fire.
Well, that's it. Since they couldn't be bothered to sign our names and they're so sure they didn't make a mistake.
Black grinned.
Take it, if you want to go. I didn't even submit a request to the ministry. I can swear on that. I'm actually leaving for Europe tomorrow. I have a contract, so.
Peter accepted the extended letter. Thank you.
Well, there's certainly nothing to thank me for. You know, Peter. I'm more than certain that James will get tired of playing soldier at some point. I mean, those Aura training courses. He doesn't need to earn his bread and butter, he has a beautiful fiancée and his own house. Adventures and skirmishes with the semi-mythical Dark Lord are much more interesting. But you. I'm sure you'll finish it. Become one of the top cadets, or whatever they call auras. You have great potential.
Peter was taken aback by such a flattering speech in his honor. I didn't expect, was all he managed to mumble.
I thought about those guys. The ones who killed your father. These people are scum and cowards. They'll turn on each other to cover their tracks. We've seen their faces. I can easily find their magical traces and mental images. Put on some invisibility charms, wander around the London branch of Scotland Yard. Infiltrating there is possible. I'll find their offices or desks, whatever muggles have. I'll leave a note for each of them, saying that their accomplice is trying to betray them and they have a witness who's decided to confess to your father's murder. No legal violations. Just a couple of notes, and their own guilt will expose them. You'll have to keep an eye on things. You know how to do that. I'll teach you a spell. If you manage to get any information from those inspectors, you can use it. If you, of course, find out anything from them. Faking handwriting with magic isn't difficult. But let them compensate your mother for his death. I checked, they were supposed to, given that he was an informant for the department, but apparently, they've been withholding it. Hopefully, they'll arrest whoever's left.
You've got quite a plan. Peter could barely get a word in. It sounds like something out of a real detective story.
You're not the only one who loves detective stories.
Sirius smirked.
Though you might not need to interfere too much. I'm sure these scumbags won't last long. An anonymous tip to the police can do quite a bit. I'll find out their names today.
We'll see how it all turns out, Peter nodded, having already made up his mind.
All right then, let's go.
His friend chuckled. Listen, a girl from Hufflepuff wrote to me last Tuesday. She's in her 5th year, or rather, 6th year now. You probably don't know her. We talked a bit sometimes. She asked me about those songs you sang on the Hogwarts Express. She wanted to know if you could give her the lyrics. She remembered 2 songs well, but not the others, Peter inquired. Having operated from Hogsmeade to London, he didn't fully grasp what Mary Stevens was writing about with such enthusiasm.
Fine.
Sirius shrugged.
I'll write them down.
Will you sing for me, too? Peter ventured to ask. Maybe we could also invite Remus. I haven't seen him since graduation. We could go to the Leaky Cauldron. We could invite others if you're leaving for Europe for a while, to say goodbye.
Sure, why not? We'll have to tell James in person anyway. I wouldn't want to do it in a letter. So, we can invite all our friends. We never really celebrated our own graduation like proper adult wizards.
Sirius winked. Then while you're at Scotland Yard, I'll visit old Tom and organize everything, Peter smiled in response. Life was definitely looking up.